we talked about the lifestyle options you have to get freedom now, and we bunched the options into three groups. The first one is options where you're still working full time. Second one is options where you're partially working. And then the third one was options where you don't need to work at all. You don't have to wait until you reach financial independence to start enjoying your life. You can do that much earlier and start living a life that you love and that's true to you. Welcome to Freedom Before FI. Using FIRE and life design techniques, we help you create freedom on your way to FI instead of waiting until you're retired to do the things that light you up. I'm your host Greg, a FIRE movement and life design enthusiast. If you're itching to get freedom now, then let's do this. Hello and good day to you. Welcome back to another episode of Freedom Before FI. So today we'll continue talking about alternative lifestyle options if you hate your job. I can imagine that might resonate with a lot of people, hence why I wanted to talk about solutions to this conundrum. If you heard the previous episode, we've split these options into three groups. So the first one was options where you're still working full time, the second was options where you're partially working, and the third one was options where you don't need to work at all. So on the last episode, we discussed the options where you're still working full time, whether that's by necessity or preference. Now on this episode, we'll dive into groups 2 and 3. Okay, so let's head on over to the options where you're partially working. So there are three alternatives in this batch. So the first one is working part-time, the second is job sharing, and then the third one is doing seasonal work. Essentially, these options help you free up more time to do the things you love while still earning some income. So starting with the first one, of course part-time work is pretty well known, and you can do this by requesting to reduce your hours at your current role or find a part-time specific role elsewhere. This might involve working 2 to 4 days a week. I know some bloggers who work part-time and built their side businesses in their spare time, giving them some runway and not be completely broke in the process. So the second and third options are a bit less well known. Okay, let's have a look at the second one, which was job sharing. So job sharing is essentially sharing a full-time role with someone else and effectively splitting it into 2 part-time roles. So for example, this could be alternating work days or work weeks, or even someone doing the morning shifts whilst the other does the afternoon shifts. It can really be tailor-made to what works best for the company and both the individuals. Now the third partially working option was seasonal work. Now with seasonal work, this involves taking on jobs which, as you might guess, only happen seasonally at certain months of the year. So some examples of this include tutoring students during important exam periods, maybe tax filing for companies or individuals during the tax season, being a summer camp worker, helping students once a year at summer camps, or as a skiing instructor during the winter months. You could even combine a few if you've got the skill sets required. Okay, so let's move over to the third group if you want some freedom now, which is the options where you don't need to work at all. Now I'm sure to everyone this already sounds awesome, and it definitely does to me. So in this phase, one of the things you can do here is take a sabbatical, or sometimes called a career break. It also has other names like mini retirement and adult gap year. But essentially it means taking time off from your full-time work to do whatever you want or need to do. This is my favourite option, and I talked about it on episode 9, so feel free to listen to that if you haven't. If you're not really feeling your job at the moment, or if you're burnt out, or if there's something bigger calling you, like a new career, a passion project or something similar, a sabbatical is a perfect option to take that much needed time off to do those things. The activities you can do on sabbatical is only limited to your creativity. I just get hyped thinking about it. I would suggest a minimum break would be 2 to 3 months. For me personally, I prefer something around the 8 to 12 months range or more to really get the most out of it. Now I'm currently on my second 12-month sabbatical now. Obviously, I understand there are financial limitations, but with good old planning and saving, you can really do it, especially if you're really eager and passionate about doing it. So what you can do on sabbatical ranges from rest and recovery, to YOLO traveling around the world, to volunteering, to learning new skills. For me, as long as it's something completely different to your routine and you get to either rest or develop personally or professionally, then that's all good. If you are thinking about doing it, feel free to reach out to me and I'd love to help you with your plans if I can. Okay, so there you have it. If you're in a position where you dislike your job and you feel that the bigger options might be too much of a transition, you can always try some of the smaller options I talked about first, just to make something happen in the short term. Okay, let's run a quick recap, shall we? We talked about the lifestyle options you have to get freedom now if you hate your job, and we bunched the options into 3 groups. The first one is options where you're still working full time. Second one is options where you're partially working, and then the third one was options where you don't need to work at all. So in the first group of options, we talked about minor pivots, intermediate level pivots, and big pivots. So minor pivots is working in your current company but negotiating some tweaks to make it better for you, for example working hours, location, a different team. For the intermediate level pivots, we talked about finding a better job. Maybe it's the same role, but a different company that suits you more. And then thirdly, we talked about big pivots, which were things like changing career or building a portfolio career. Now for the second group of options, where you're partially working, there are 3 things that we talked about. The first one was working part-time, the second one was job sharing, and then the third one was doing seasonal work. And then for the third group, which is the options where you don't need to work at all, we talked about sabbaticals, also known as mini retirements, taking a career break, or taking an adult gap year. If you think this episode would help a friend, please don't hesitate to share it with them. The show notes can be found at freedombeforefi.substack.com. If you have a question or want to connect, feel free to send me an email at freedombeforefi@proton.me. That's freedombeforefi@proton.me. If you found this show useful and want to be notified of future episodes, you can follow us on Spotify or Apple via the show's main page or on whatever app you're using right now. And lastly, if you've just learned one good thing that will help you in your journey and you want to help us out here, please do leave a 5-star rating on your podcast player app. If you're using Apple Podcasts, you can even leave a nice review by scrolling to the bottom of the podcast page. That would help us out loads. Alright, so those are some alternative lifestyle options that can help you get freedom if you currently hate your job. I hope that's given you some ideas and inspiration on your journey. And as always, practice gratitude, live life by your design, and do things that make you smile. You got this.